Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Case, which is a podcast where global leaders from Harvard Business School's OPM community join in a personal capacity and they share the real decisions, life principles, and mental models that go behind building enduring companies. My guest today is someone who's very special. I think we all need to hear him and think about how we're structuring our businesses. And that's something I think he can speak more about because most of the successful entrepreneurs that I know have not just done a good job starting and scaling a business, they've been very efficient with the tax planning as well. And that's what Juan Carlos is an expert in. So, how are you, Juan?
I'm doing well, Sohin. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself, your company, and tell us about what you do?
Absolutely. Juan Carlos Almanza from San Antonio, Texas, originating from border town, Laredo and Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas. My firm focuses on international tax, inbound investment, and gradually we've expanded to family office services and co-GP services for our clients as they establish presence in the US.
And what got you interested in this field? Advising global families on complex tax and estate matters.
Well, Sohin, it really started gradually, right? But the way it really started, the short answer is, I applied for an internship position while I was studying at UTSA, the University of Texas in San Antonio, and the post or the job opening kind of read along the lines of bookkeeping, tax preparation, payroll services for international clients. So I responded to that internship, got hired, was working for a CFP at the time, and it was 2004. That was a year. And it had to do with Mexican clients coming to the United States, establishing presence here under an immigration visa. And the immigration visa, as you may know or may not know, the United States has several types of visas for investors, which usually requires some type of investment at risk, job creation, or stimulating the economy in some way, shape, or form. That's really the short answer. More background on that is I am from a border city. So I was born in Laredo, Texas, south of the border down in Texas, but grew up in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, which is the Mexican side. And that upbringing, although it wasn't very clear at the time I responded to that internship post, really got me into different way of thinking and constant changes from language to environment to interests, sports. Mexico is huge in football. The US is huge in basketball. So I'm a better basketball player than a soccer player just because the way I grew up. But that constant dynamic, switching from cultures, just governance, the way things operate, really got my creativity, I think, and looking at things from different angles. So now fast forward that to the internship post in 2004, that's when there was a crisis. What started as the initial crisis that to this day Mexico is going through, which is the violence from different organizations involved in trafficking, so on and so forth. 2004 was the real beginning of that, and you saw a lot of families coming to the United States looking for safety for their families and for themselves. There was kidnappings, perhaps, and some were just afraid of that, so they came to the US, applied for a visa, and this internship was our service from that CFP was to maintain the books, do the reporting, because when it come renewal time, they had to show proof that they had paid employees, that they had a growing business or they had revenues to sustain that application and had financial statements to prove that, right? So that was our main objective there. I was still studying, so that really started giving me purpose. I could truly understand where my Mexican clients were coming from because my family to this day lives in the Mexican side. I have a sister who lives in Austin, Texas, but my youngest sister still lives in Nuevo Laredo. My parents do as well, so I frequently go to Nuevo Laredo, and so my family lives in in a Mexican environment. So I started finding and talking to my clients and really feeding them from their perspective because that was my perspective. What started really getting me personally, right? And it started being like a personal mission was I saw that throughout, as renewals came about, some of the businesses didn't do as well. And they didn't do as well because the focus was not necessarily on business opportunity in the US. The motivation was safety. And I need to make this visa work. So everything was framed around, if the immigration attorney is telling me I need 5 employees, even though I may be able to do it with two, I will get the 5 employees. So they would start forcing their decisions around I need that renewal. Right. So I kind of caught on to that. And my goal was to say, well, maybe we can kill two birds with one stone. What if there was really a business opportunity that could feel natural? And at the same time provide the quotas or the benchmarks to obtain that visa and renew it. So that's from that internship, I went on to work for other firms locally here in San Antonio. One of which was very big on international tax, and another one that was not very domestic. I broke out early in my career and started my own firm, in part because there was this different way in the way I thought about the services that were not transactional. For me, they were relationships. So just because of the nature of the business or the profession, you get very close with your clients. So you do really get to know them and their families throughout the years. It was just last week that I was talking to one of my good friends, still client, um, when he came to the U.S., which was about 12 years ago. His daughters or his children were babies almost. One of his oldest was working at the firm for the past year, and we went on had dinner together and kind of reminiscing on how this relationship came about. And now we see each other almost every week. We interact with the families, and that's just the type of relationships that through this profession and what I do precisely is it's inevitable. You just create these relationships where you feel personally responsible for their success or not. So it's something I really enjoy. It gives me purpose, not only in the business side, but also purpose and fulfillment. I really, really enjoy what I do.
In your line of work, what kind of mistakes are you seeing most successful entrepreneurs make before they think about long term planning?
Before you think about long-term planning. So let's put it in the frame of successful entrepreneurs are usually the entrepreneurs that have profits, right? Or they're being profitable. One of the things I see, and it's a common theme, especially with younger entrepreneurs that are, starting to see the profitability come in. It's the sense of getting distracted with shiny objects or shiny opportunities that may seem incredible, but it's often a distractor. It distracts them from innovation and value creation in their own business, the golden goose, if you would, and start getting distracted where, perhaps I'll start doing this and that, and they start spreading themselves too thin. So sometimes, profitability comes in, and as you probably know as well, Sohin, and, we kind of saw this through the OPM cases and discussing with the rest of our colleagues is, profitability is can come and go, right? There could be the good times and bad times. And the minute you take your eye off the ball, whether it's economic conditions or external factors, that profitability can go away real quickly if we don't pay attention to it. And that's one of the common themes I see. The business is doing well, we're being profitable, it can go on autopilot while I go venture out into all these pitches and opportunities that inevitably come come to our desk or come to our attention. I think there's a quote by Richard Branson that says business opportunities are like buses, right? There's always one coming. And it seems that as young entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs, it's like, well, if I did it here, I could do it in every other venture. And some actually do, right? They do, and they're very good. I've been reading some stories, and not only on OPMers, which I admire, where there's multiple successful businesses that they're able to launch. And I do think that that's a skill set, and is it's more rare than not, right? One of that is the constant distraction of getting away from the core business. I think that's a big mistake. Maybe happened to me a bit, but I have my real estate investments that are family investments that we did for our own estate planning. But there was a time where I was being tilted a lot of the attention towards that. That was a few years ago, and now we're back. But yeah, that's one of the things is protecting yourself from ourselves from shiny objects and what may seem like the best deal.
So, talk to us about trusts. What are trusts, and why do people consider setting them up?
So trusts, they're arrangements, they're legal, they're documents that help preserve wealth, transfer wealth to other generations, and they serve many purposes. There's so many different types of trust in the U.S. It's important asset protection from litigation and lawsuits. It's a highly litigious country. A trust is it's a vehicle for asset protection, wealth transfer, and essentially legacy planning. If your desire or one's desire is to leave something behind and be it being handled the way we want it to be handled, a trust usually can do that. You can manage your estate or your wealth from the grave. Oftentimes, that's what I hear attorneys kind of say to the clients, which is true. However, there's complexity, there's administrative matters that have to take into place, and a lot of discipline. And but essentially, that's what they are. They could be their own separate taxpayer in the U.S. or not. And so it all depends on how they're set up and the type of trust.
How soon can an entrepreneur think about setting up a trust?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Very, very early. And that might be another, not mistake, but perhaps something that as we're establishing our businesses and they are being profitable, we might think we're 29, we're 35, 45, or 50. We still have a lot of time to think about succession planning. And, that could be farther from the truth. I think trust should be set up when early on because it's going to be something that is going to be continuous. It's not something that you usually set up and and it goes on autopilot, right? It's something that you got to set up, maintain, and it might change as you evolve, as you age, as your family grows, as conditions change. The trust structure can be flexible enough as well, and you should be able to make changes that are around your goals and desires that you want personally. So the earlier the better. It is a separate discipline or it's a separate responsibility. And I do see sometimes that when we think about trust is, well, once I set up a trust, that's it. I'm protected, it's tax efficient. I could use it continue my legacy. And it's one time deal. I go with the attorney, I go with the CPA, we get it done, and that's it. And that's just not the case. It's so the earlier, the better. You'll also see that for purposes of scrutiny from IRS, which is what that's my core line of work, representation before the Internal Revenue Service for clients and taxpayers, is the sooner the better because reasonableness and intent other than tax motivating factors, right? So the earlier, the better. We need to learn the ins and outs of how to operate it, which is very important for it to be successful, right? It's not something to just be on paper and put it on your drawer and forget about it. You actually have to act it out. You have to act out based on those rules in order for them to work.
And what are some of the other vehicles available to business owners outside of a trust that they can consider?
For business owners, oh well, so the trust is a usually sits at the very top of the organizational structure of the ownership structure, and the trust is man, like I was saying, asset protection. There are some tax efficiencies on the estate tax side. That is different, by the way, and between domestic taxpayers, U.S. taxpayers, and foreign taxpayers, right? So that's something to consider there. But so the trust is sits at the very top, meant for generational transferring over to generations. But then there's other layers that we should consider, and especially doing business in the U.S. Holding companies. Holding companies serve as the governance entity. That's where rules for operating businesses, redundancy there, but that's what the holding companies usually do. So family limited partnerships, family holding LLCs, general partnerships that are not the best vehicle, but those are also there. So then you have your whole entities, and then you have your subsidiary operating vehicles and entities as well. That those are used also for asset protection, tax optimization, and other objectives that are part of the main entrepreneur's goals and goal setting. So it's not a one entity or one bulletproof. It's a combination of several entities that make the ideal structure. And the ideal structure is going to be dictated by the founder, by the entrepreneur, based on what it is that they want to accomplish with their business, their family, their legacy planning. And that's how that's designed. But in general terms, trust, holding companies, and then subsidiaries of operating companies is usually optimizes and accomplishes the founder's goals.
What's a tax planning move that you wish more entrepreneurs made before a liquidity event?
In the US, which is different than Mexico, for example, that's the other jurisdiction that I'm constantly comparing to just because that's my core target and market. In the US, tax planning revolving around tax motives, it doesn't tend to do very well when an IRS agent contests or there's an IRS audit. So the best tax planning move is what is it that we want to do within our businesses, which is tied into estate planning as far as value creation, business motive. And then secondary, we add the tax incentives or optimization. So when we talk about tax planning, I usually start with, okay, what it is that we're trying to accomplish. What is your business industry? How are we going to make this business successful? Going back to the original question, how I got started here, that was a very great experience where when I put those two together, it's like, well, you're not being successful in the US, not because you can't be, it's because your focus is not, focus is not aligned. Your focus is making sure you obtain a visa versus for profit motive or business motive. And that's the same thing for tax planning. Sometimes we want to chase that deduction, we want to chase that credit, but it's like, is that aligned with what the business really needs? Or are we forcing things to obtain that tax benefit? So I usually revert back in all of my tax planning files, or most of them, that we first have to document and ensure that our clients and the firm were aligned with what is the business, what are we trying to accomplish? And secondary, we have the tax optimization strategies. And it's just a good way of framing post planning behavior, right? So that's that's a big one. That is not very obvious, right? Because when you come to a tax planner, first thing you want to hear is, give me all the tax breaks, give me all the tax strategies, give me all the good stuff, right? And it's like building a home, right? And it's like building a home, going to the architect and saying, well, build me a house, right? Or and it's like, I can build you anything, but it's what is it that you want from the home? What is it that you enjoy? How many family members? How many years do you see yourself living in it? Similar concept, it's tax architecture. So we have to start with what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and then yes, we will have a roof, we will have a foundation. It'll be strong, it'll be beautiful, but we can't start with just build me a house, right? Because that could be very different depending on who's going to live in it.
You spoke about families, so just building on top of that, what makes successful conversations amongst family members, in your opinion, when they're thinking about governance across multiple generations and also the passing of assets across multiple generations? What are some of the conversations that you think should be encouraged?
Once we get past what it is that the founder wants, so once we get past the personal vision, that has to be there because everything else gets fogged if it's not there. Then we establish family. What vision do you have for the family? And then we move towards how are we going to be running your estate. So one of the things that oftentimes gets skipped is not being very clear on what it is that we want as entrepreneurs and founders, because it's a profound question, right? It's philosophical at most, right? And I usually do my kind of planning in December. So I just went through it. And believe it or not, I mean, it's like, even though I tend to think in these terms, just I guess going back to my upbringing, different angles and constantly just trying to figure out where it is that I'm going with my things. What is it that I want from my family as I see my family growing? Well, they're very different than what they were last year, right? My daughter's turning 14 and 11, and every year it seems like, they come up with, their personalities are changing based on how I see them evolving. That also um, makes me think as far as, well, maybe we need to tweak it here. So the first thing is, what is it that really fulfills me? And I translate that back to my client. right? Is before we start, establishing trust and who's going to get what is it that you want? And I do find that that question, it takes some time to develop. That's how I consider my services to be a little personalized because I do tend to get philosophical with things. I really like to know the essence. And part of that is my nature, my curiosity. And then from there, if I find that my clients do not have that, that's where we spend a lot of the times because you'll see that whenever they establish trust and everything else, letter of wishes is part of it. And that letter of wishes contains who's getting what, who should be at the helm or at the heading the family businesses, who is the most equipped, who is the most, who's more, should it all be equal? Should it not be equal? And we saw that at the Murdoch case at OPM, where it's like a multi-million dollar empire or billion-dollar empire. And even there, it didn't seem like they got it down, right? It seems that, we get so into our business that when it comes time to think about these things, it's like, we'll put it in the back burner. Of course, I know what I want. Of course, I know what I want for my family. It isn't until you need to articulate and write it down that it becomes like, do I really know what I want from the family? And that's where it starts getting tricky. So, to your original question or to the question, right? What is it that those conversations that should have is before we have the conversations, is do we actually know what we want from all of this, right? Because creating profits for the sake of creating profits, it's just like we know that that doesn't lead to fulfillment. We know that it's got to be more purpose. It's got to be purpose driven. And that purpose driven is usually the founder, the entrepreneur. Yes, of course, the family, the immediate family, the spouse has a lot to do with it. Or if it's generational, it has to do a lot with, what father or grandfather wanted us to be like, right? But when you come to the head of that family, there's a lot to do with you as far as how that is planned out. And based on what is it that you want and then what you want for the family, those two come side right after the other, then you can start having those conversations. And I assist personally. I don't have volume of families, by the way. So, and I didn't mention that earlier. Is my firm is very boutique, and I do pick and choose clients just because it involves me a lot personally. So a lot of this stuff, if my client is going through a situation, inevitably it affects how I feel, how, my thinking, my thought process at that particular stage. If one of my clients is going through a sale of a business, a merger, an acquisition, or some pre-immigration move, I tend to be preoccupied until that stage is done. And I take that home with me and I take it in, my day to day, my vacations until we don't get the job done. I do tend to, become a personal counselor for the clients. And whenever they're going to start having those conversations, when we have gone through that period of, all right, do we know what we want? Excellent. Let's discuss it. Convey that over to me because now I can help with navigating what should be perhaps in an operating agreement or distribution clauses or control or who we bring to the table. By the way, I'm not an attorney. I pair my clients with the right attorney, but I don't send them to the attorney without having this preparation first. Because my attorney friends, if they're listening to my colleagues, you guys are the best. But sometimes it's very transactional, because everyone is, we got to go on to the next kind of thing. And when it comes to all this planning and the angle I take with my clients is we need the document, but we don't need a document that was appropriate for somebody else. This needs to be custom tailored. So I usually prepare them with what is the company agreement? What does the operating agreement do? Are we talking about a operating entity? Are we talking about the holding company? Or are we talking about the the trust control features? Are we talking about your letter of wishes? Are we talking about phase one of the trust, phase two? Is it a dynasty trust? Are you trying to establish it for your grandchildren? So it depends at which stage we're discussing, and then we pair them up with the proper attorney. Goals in mind, right?
I can already see you making a customer heroes.
Absolutely right. It's like, and even when we came back from OPM, it's like, how do I make the customer the hero, and to even improve upon that? But just as we're talking now, it's that is the center focal point. It has to be in order for our services to be not only appropriate and value driven, but it also leaves a sense of fulfillment.
For the next question, it's about QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock. And I do understand that you may not be a subject matter expert for that, but in your experience, what is your understanding of QSBS for entrepreneurs and how does it benefit them?
Yes. So the qualified business stock is tax planning for U.S. taxpayers. Since my core is on foreign, and eventually they do become a lot of them become U.S. taxpayers after the pre-immigration planning is done. For foreign individuals, because the QSBS is for individuals, QSBS is meant to eliminate capital gains tax whenever you exit out of a closely held business. For foreign taxpayers, it's capital gains are usually through treaties, right? It also depends the jurisdiction, but they're not subject to U.S. taxation. So if, for example, Zohin, if you're not a U.S. taxpayer and you want to establish a business in the U.S. for exit, you're building something and then you're going to exit out. If you maintain your residency, your tax residence outside the United States, that capital gain is usually going to escape U.S. taxation. So it's not a huge planning tool or aspect of my practice, but in general terms, QSPS is meant to eliminate capital gains tax at an exit. And there's thresholds, there's income thresholds, there's holding period thresholds, and it's got to be for individuals, right? That's something to just keep in mind. But it is something to consider if you are planning an exit and to become a U.S. person, a U.S. taxpayer. That is definitely something that is there.
Moving away from some of these technical conversations to your personal journey, what inspired you to apply to OPM?
Good question, Zoe. Good question. I'm 43, so it had to do with everything that I'm doing now, as we've been discussing. I'm very family office, family business driven. I'm very intrigued a lot about psychology, philosophy, purpose in life. Right? Throughout my career, I've seen even as a young CPA, that my firm started when I was 25. So from 25 to 43, there's been a lot of situations I've seen, and one of the, I guess, frustrating for me and sad at the same time is seeing some of my older clients. Some have passed already. That I could see that there was no. They've gotten to the pinnacle of their businesses. They were multimillionaires, but you could still see that sense that perhaps they're not fulfilled. Right? And that for me, that just scares me, terrifying for me. Going through life, going through all these stresses and risks and everything we go through, obstacles and not having a sense of, is this worth it? So for me, OPM, as I'm going more into the stage of, I really want to help more entrepreneurs and founders find the purpose and then align it with their business operations, tax optimization, eventually, their legacy, and making sure that they they have that vision for their family, and that actually plays out. Because you can have the vision, you can structure it, but if you don't have the right governance in place, it falls apart. It just doesn't really work. It's not only it's not only written, you gotta live it out. Actually, you have to essentially really believe it. So OPM for me was a chance to, it was also my it's, I wouldn't consider my midlife maybe. I could have gotten a Ferrari perhaps, but for me it's constantly getting, nourishing from ideas, talking to you, Zohan, at that break in unit one, it's like, that is my sense of, man, I can contribute here. And at the same time, I'm getting so many other angles and, from all the industries and different types of business. I mean, that for me is so fascinating because there's so many other things that could still go into my repertoire, I guess, of ideas and angles that OPM will help me frame and help the other founders and family enterprises with type of making customer the hero, or Zopa and Batman, right? Helping them negotiate through things. It's just, for me, it was just, I need another set of ideas and angles. And at the same time, for me, it's like, do I venture out something else? What do I do? But I came back and it's like reaffirming that all these years that I've been thinking about what is it that, I want, it just confirmed this is where we're at. This is for me scaling. That one of the big topics is, do you build a business to last, or do you build to sell? And scaling versus maintaining. It goes, my type of business seems that if I want to scale, then it the end result, the deliverable, the service product has to change. It can't be very relationship driven, because if you scale that to a certain degree, you could lose the magic behind it. That was also a big takeaway for me. But the main reason why I applied for OPM was looking for that next sense of my next 40 years. And what better way than do it with a great group of individuals, brilliant, hard charging, driven, and everyone looking for also a sense of what's next, and how do I scale my companies? How do I add more value to my companies? And that to me was fascinating. And I like being around new ideas as I look to sharpen my ideas.
If you were to talk to a younger version of yourself, what advice would you give him? The 25-year-old you who's about to start his own practice.
Definitely systems, right? Operating systems. That's one of the things that I'm a visionary by nature. That's just part of who I am. I live a lot in my own mind as I'm trying to solve situations. Even at a young age, my time horizons have always been in blocks of 10 years, huge blocks, right? And I just hold that and hold that and hold that until, eventually you think about something long enough, you'll get an answer, you get a response, right? And for me, I tend to live a lot on the vision side, that I've been, for a big part of my career, I was successful because of the dreaming aspect, right? Because that's what pulled things and got my discipline and driving factor, and it got through. But then you get at an age where, wow, that self sustaining, or you holding everything together from doing the different things, it can take a toll on some aspect of life, whether it's family, whether it's your own personal time and headspace, or was it, or it might be, you just cannot scale because you can't delegate, and therefore you can't elevate, right, to certain positions. We have systems in place now, but if I could have given my younger self advice, we don't put that off. At the beginning, especially for professional services, it seems that you could do it all, and yes, you could do it all because you don't have a lot of relationships to tend to. Those take time, and those gradually start expanding. But by the time you figure that out, it's like, oh my God, I had a lot on my plate, but I still have to, operate. So definitely an operating system we currently use, and I don't get any advertising or anything from this, but EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, that for me has been transformative, right? Because it's a way for me to dump in, my ideas, do it in such a structured way that then I can convey over to the rest of my team. So definitely, if I would have done that earlier, perhaps it would have saved a lot of headaches.
My last question for you is there a book which has fundamentally changed the way you think about life or leadership or money?
Yes. So right now we're here. We're in my home, and this is my personal library. I know you can't kind of see it, but it's full of books. If I can name a few, right? A Catcher in the Rye, of course. Kind of growing up, that's I reference Holden Caulfield a lot when I'm either traveling or anything else. That just always pops in mind. But definitely, what got me into self development and ultimate centered around responsibility for where I'm at and my own mistakes and my own solutions was As a Man Thinks by James Allen. Is an essay, 21 pages. I always have it on my phone. I'll share it with you. I print it during Christmas. I give it out for Christmas. It's 21 pages, and it really changed my perception of things. There's a quote from it that as a man thinks, so he becomes. As he continues to think, so he remains. So our thoughts, we are the total sum of our thoughts, right? And being a person that lives in his headspace, that for me was like, okay, I want to know more about this train of thoughts. Think and Grow Rich as well by Napoleon Hill. I mean, that's a classic. And around the same theme to most recently Modern Man in Search for the Soul by Carl Jung, which centers around 40 years old, right? And how, collective unconscious, every human being that came before us, we have some of that. We're growth by nature. As the universe expands, we're expanding with it. And it talks a lot about the midlife and what we do from here. What do we do in our next 40 years? The first 40 years was just preparation. Now it's game time. Now we're ready. Championship championship tournament has began.
Thank you so much. I think this is very helpful. It's going to benefit a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. So I thank you for your time, and I look to seeing you again soon.
Likewise, Sohin, and I want to thank you for taking the initiative to doing this podcast. It's amazing. I think we get to learn from our other OPMers in ways that perhaps we wouldn't if it wouldn't be for your podcast. So I really appreciate you taking this initiative. I thank you for your time, and for whoever's listening. I hope that this was helpful. You can always contact me offline as well. And I look forward to seeing everyone in Unit 2.
And how could they contact you? Could you just share maybe a way to reach out to you for someone who wants to speak more?
Absolutely. So from our OPMers, we have our WhatsApp group. Happy to just shoot a text. I'm usually just I'm slow in responding just because I like to take, I like to concentrate and message with intention for everyone. And sometimes that kind of slows me down a bit. But I eventually get down to the messages, whether it's a week later, but I get to read them all, and I respond to all of them. And my email, jc at almanzacpafirm.com, and telephone number. This is my cell number too.
Amazing, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. And talk soon. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you, Zohin. See you soon. Bye bye.